The cage was barely tall enough for Cora to sit upright. 3 days she had been locked inside it, rattling along muddy roads in the back of a merchant's wagon. No food since the first morning. Water twice, shoved through the bars like she was an animal. Her wrists were raw from the iron shackles, and her voice was hoarse from screaming protests that no one cared to hear. This was her punishment for telling the truth. She had been the record keeper for Lord Ashford, one of the most powerful nobles in the Eastern Territories. For 6 years, she had documented his dealings, his transactions, his correspondence. She had been good at her work. Too good, as it turned out. Because she had noticed the discrepancies. Small at first. A few coins missing here, a shipment unaccounted for there. But over time, the pattern became clear. Lord Ashford was stealing from the crown. Taxes meant for the Lycan king were being siphoned into private accounts. Supplies intended for the kingdom's soldiers were being sold to foreign buyers. Cora had done what any loyal subject should do. She had reported it. She had expected justice. She had expected Lord Ashford to be arrested, his crimes exposed, his victims compensated. Instead, Lord Ashford had laughed in her face. "Who do you think they'll believe?" he had asked, his smile cold as a winter grave. A noble lord with centuries of standing? Or a nobody record keeper with delusions of importance? He had been right. The magistrate had dismissed her claims without investigation. The witnesses she had gathered had mysteriously recanted, and Lord Ashford, rather than face any consequences, had decided to make an example of her. "Sell her," he had told his guards. "Find someone far away who can use a literate slave. I want her gone." So here she was, caged like a beast, being transported to God's knew where, all because she had been foolish enough to believe that truth mattered. The wagon lurched to a stop. Cora pressed herself against the bars, trying to see where they had arrived. Her heart sank as she took in the massive stone walls, the towers flying black banners, the armoured guards at every gate. The royal castle, the seat of the Lycan king himself. "Out," the merchant grunted, unlocking her cage. "Move it. The steward's expecting you." She was dragged through corridors of cold stone, past servants who averted their eyes, past guards who looked through her like she didn't exist. The shackles clinked with every step, a constant reminder of what she had become. They stopped before a pair of massive doors. The merchant shoved her forward. "The new acquisition," he announced to someone Cora couldn't see. "Record keeper as requested. Literate, numerate, trained in correspondence. She's got a mouth on her, but nothing a firm hand won't fix." Cora's jaw tightened. Even now, even in chains, something in her refused to be silent. "I'm not an acquisition," she said. Her voice came out rough, damaged from days without proper water, but the words were clear. "I'm a free woman who was illegally enslaved because I exposed a lord's corruption. If there's any justice in this kingdom—" "Quiet." The merchant cuffed her across the face, snapping her head to the side. "Didn't I tell you about that mouth? Leave her!" The new voice cut through the room like a blade through silk, deep, calm, utterly commanding. Cora raised her head, blinking blood from a split lip, and found herself staring at the Lycan king. He was nothing like the portraits that hung in Lord Ashford's manor, those stiff, formal images of a distant monarch. In person, King Aldrich was vital, intense, with dark hair that fell across a face both handsome and severe. His eyes were the colour of hammered gold, and they were fixed on her with an expression she couldn't read. "Your Majesty." The merchant dropped into a hasty bow. I didn't realize you would be. The steward said, The steward answers to me, as do you. The king hadn't moved from where he stood, but power radiated from him like heat from a forge. You struck her. She was being insolent, Your Majesty. She has a habit of speaking out of turn. So I heard. Aldrich's gaze remained on Cora. She claims she was illegally enslaved, that she exposed corruption. Is this true? She's a liar, Your Majesty. Lord Ashford warned me she would spin tales. She's delusional, possibly dangerous. I wasn't asking you. The king's voice sharpened. I was asking her. Cora stared at him. No one had asked for her side. Not the magistrate, not the witnesses, not anyone in the 3 days since her world had collapsed. And now the Lycan king himself was looking at her like her words mattered. It's true, she said. Every word. Lord Ashford has been stealing from the crown for at least 4 years. I had documentation, ledgers, correspondence, shipping manifests. He destroyed most of it when he had me arrested, but some of it might still exist. The discrepancies are real. The theft is real. And my enslavement is illegal. That's quite an accusation. It's not an accusation. It's the truth. She met his golden eyes, refusing to look away. I know no one believes me. I know I'm nobody, and he's a powerful lord, and the word of a chained woman means nothing against centuries of noble standing. But you asked, so I'm telling you. I spoke the truth, and I was punished for it. That's what happened. Silence stretched through the room. The merchant shifted nervously. The guards exchanged uncertain glances. The king studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he descended from the dais and crossed the room to stand directly before her. He was tall. She had to crane her neck to meet his eyes. This close, she could see the faint lines around his mouth, the weight of responsibility etched into his features. He looked tired, she realized. Tired and watchful, and something else she couldn't name. You're either very brave or very foolish, he said quietly. Accusing a lord of treason to the king's face while wearing chains with no evidence to support you. I'm neither. I'm just honest. Her voice cracked slightly. It's all I have left. If I stop telling the truth now, then everything I've lost was for nothing. Something flickered in those golden eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or respect. Remove her chains, the king said. The merchant sputtered. Your Majesty, she's property. I have a bill of sale. That bill of sale is void. Enslaving a free woman is a crime, regardless of who ordered it. Aldrich turned to his guards. Remove her chains and have her taken to the guest quarters. See that she's fed, bathed, and given proper clothing. Your Majesty. And arrest this man. He didn't raise his voice, but the command was absolute. He knowingly trafficked an illegally enslaved person. He'll stand trial alongside whatever investigation follows. The merchant's protests were cut short as the guards seized him. Cora stood frozen, her shackles hanging open, unable to process what was happening. The king turned back to her. His expression had softened slightly, though his eyes remained intent. You spoke the truth at great personal cost, he said. You were punished for it, abandoned, sold. And still, when given the chance to lie, to make things easier for yourself, you chose honesty. He paused. I would hear more of this truth you carry, if you're willing to share it. You believe me? The words came out disbelieving. Just like that? I believe that a woman willing to accuse a powerful lord while standing in chains before a king is either lying spectacularly or telling the absolute truth. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. And you don't strike me as a spectacular liar. Cora didn't know what to say. She had prepared herself for dismissal, for mockery, for more punishment, not for belief, not for rescue. Why? She finally asked. Why would you care what happened to a record keeper from the Eastern Territories? Because I've spent my entire reign surrounded by people who tell me what I want to hear. His voice was quiet, but something in it resonated with bone-deep weariness. Lies wrapped in silk, truths hidden beneath flattery. I am starving for someone willing to speak plainly, regardless of the consequences. He extended his hand to her, not to shake, but to help her steady herself on legs that had grown weak from days in a cage. You were sent away for speaking the truth, he said. Then I'll hear it, all of it. And if Lord Ashford is guilty of what you claim, I will see him answer for every coin he stole and every injustice he committed. Cora looked at his hand, steady, calloused, waiting. She took it. And as the king led her out of the audience chamber, toward food and rest and the first kindness she had known in days, Cora felt something she had thought dead stir back to life. Hope, fragile and uncertain, but there nonetheless. Maybe truth did matter after all. The guest chambers were nicer than any room Cora had ever occupied. A fire blazed in the hearth, warming air that smelled of lavender and fresh linen. The bed was enormous, draped in deep green velvet, piled with more pillows than one person could possibly need. Through tall windows, she could see the castle gardens below, their winter roses blooming white against the snow. She stood in the center of the room, freshly bathed, dressed in a borrowed gown of soft wool, and waited for the trap to spring. There had to be a trap. No one was this kind without wanting something in return. The king had freed her, yes, but that didn't mean she was safe. Lords played games with people like her all the time, raising them up only to tear them down, offering hope as a weapon. She would not be fooled again. A knock at the door made her tense. "Come in." It was not a servant who entered, but the king himself. Aldrich had changed from his formal attire into something simpler. A dark tunic, worn leather boots, no crown. Without the trappings of royalty, he looked younger somehow, more approachable, though his golden eyes still carried that weight she had noticed before. "You haven't eaten?" She glanced at the tray that had been left for her. Bread, cheese, soup, a slice of honey cake. Her stomach ached with hunger, but she hadn't been able to make herself touch it. "I wasn't sure if it was safe." "You think I would poison you?" "I think I've learned not to trust easily." She met his gaze. 3 days ago, I was a respected record keeper with a future. Now I'm... She gestured at herself, at the borrowed clothes, at the beautiful cage of a room. "I don't know what I am." "You're a guest." He moved into the room, but kept his distance, settling into a chair by the fire. "An informant, perhaps, if your claims about Lord Ashford prove true, but for now, simply a guest. Guests can leave." "Yes, they can." He tilted his head slightly. "Is that what you want? To leave?" Cora hesitated. She had nowhere to go. Her family had disowned her years ago when she chose work over marriage. Her friends in Lord Ashford's household would have been told whatever lies he'd spun. She was alone in the world, with nothing but the truth she carried. "No," she admitted quietly. "I don't want to leave. I want..." She stopped, unsure how to finish. "What do you want?" The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in years. perhaps ever. I want justice, she said finally. I want Lord Ashford to answer for what he's done, not just to me, but to the kingdom, to all the soldiers who went without supplies, all the villages whose taxes were stolen, all the people who suffered because of his greed. That's what you want for others. What do you want for yourself? She stared at him. The firelight played across his features, softening the severity of his face. He looked genuinely curious, not like he was setting a trap, but like he actually cared about her answer. I don't know, she admitted. I stopped thinking about what I wanted a long time ago. Wanting things just leads to disappointment. That's a bleak philosophy. It's an honest one. She wrapped her arms around herself. I learned early that the world doesn't care what I want. It only cares what I can provide. My skills, my labor, my usefulness. The moment I stopped being useful to Lord Ashford, I became disposable. Aldrich was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Tell me about yourself. Not about Lord Ashford, not about the corruption. About you. Where did you come from? How did you learn to keep records? Why do you care? Because you interest me. He said it simply, without artifice. I've met hundreds of people who would lie through their teeth to save themselves. I've met very few who would tell the truth knowing it would destroy them. I want to understand what made you that way. Cora didn't know how to respond to that. She moved to the window, looking out at the gardens rather than at him. I was born in a village near the southern border, she said slowly. My father was a merchant. Not wealthy, but comfortable. He taught me numbers before I could properly read. Said a woman who understood money would never be at the mercy of men who didn't. He sounds wise. He was. He died when I was 12. The old grief stirred, dull and familiar. Fever took him and my mother both. I had no siblings, no close relatives willing to take me in. So I went to work. At 12. There was no other choice. I cleaned houses, ran errands, did whatever I could to survive. Eventually, a merchant noticed I could calculate sums in my head faster than his clerks. He hired me. I worked my way up, position by position, until I reached Lord Ashford's household. She laughed bitterly. I thought I had finally made something of myself. I was respected, valued. I thought I was safe. And then you found the discrepancies. And then I was stupid enough to report them. That wasn't stupidity. Aldrich's voice was firm. That was integrity. A rare commodity in a world full of people willing to look the other way. Integrity got me sold into slavery. Integrity also got you standing in the royal castle, telling your story to the king. He rose from his chair and crossed to stand beside her at the window. I'm not saying what happened to you was just. It wasn't. It was a travesty, and I intend to correct it. But I won't let you believe that speaking the truth was wrong. Cora turned to look at him. This close, she could see the golden flecks in his eyes, the faint scar at his temple, the lines of exhaustion that spoke of too many sleepless nights. Why does this matter so much to you? She asked. I'm nobody. A record keeper. There must be dozens of injustices across your kingdom. Why focus on mine? Because you're the one standing in front of me. His voice had gone quiet, almost gentle. Because I can't fix every wrong in my kingdom, but I can fix this one. And because... He paused, something shifting in his expression. Because my wolf has been restless since the moment you walked into my hall. I don't know what that means yet, but I've learned not to ignore it. Cora's breath caught. His wolf. The bond that Lycans shared with their animal halves, the instinct that guided them toward... No, She couldn't think about that. Couldn't let herself hope for something so impossible. I should eat, she said abruptly, stepping away from the window, before the food gets cold. If Aldrich was disappointed by her retreat, he didn't show it. He simply nodded and moved toward the door. I'll have investigators sent to the Eastern Territories tomorrow, he said. Whatever evidence Lord Ashford destroyed, there may be traces left. Witnesses willing to talk now that you're under royal protection. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. He paused at the door, looking back at her. I have a feeling this investigation is going to uncover more than either of us expected. Lord Ashford has allies at court. This won't be simple. Nothing ever is. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. No, it isn't. Good night, Cora. Good night, Your Majesty. Aldrich? He held her gaze. When we're alone, I would prefer you call me Aldrich. Then he was gone, the door clicking softly behind him. Cora stood in the silence, her heart pounding. She crossed to the table and sat down, forcing herself to eat, even though her appetite had vanished. A king had asked for her name, her story, her truth, had told her his wolf was restless, had looked at her like she was something more than useful. She didn't trust it. Couldn't trust it. Trust was a luxury she had lost the right to claim. But as she ate, and the fire crackled, and the snow fell softly outside the window, something warm flickered in her chest. Something that felt dangerously like hope. 2 weeks passed, and the investigation grew teeth. Aldrich's men had returned from the Eastern Territories with evidence that exceeded even Cora's expectations. Ledgers hidden in a false wall, correspondence buried in a garden, witnesses who had been too afraid to speak while Lord Ashford held power, now eager to testify under royal protection. The corruption was worse than she had known. Years of theft, decades of manipulation, a network of co-conspirators that reached into the highest levels of nobility. Lord Ashford wasn't just a thief. He was the center of a web that had been draining the kingdom for generations. Cora spent her days poring over documents with the king's investigators, her nights dreaming of ledgers and numbers, and the cold smile on Lord Ashford's face when he'd had her arrested. It was on the 15th night that she finally broke. She woke, screaming, thrashing against sheets that felt like chains, convinced she was back in the cage, back on the road, back in the darkness, with no one coming to save her. Cora, Cora, wake up. Hands gripped her shoulders, firm but gentle. A voice cut through the panic, familiar and grounding. Her eyes flew open. Aldrich was there, kneeling beside her bed, his golden eyes wide with concern. He was dressed in sleep clothes, his hair disheveled, as if he had come running the moment he heard her scream. "You're safe," he said. "You're in the castle, you're safe." She couldn't speak, could only gasp for air, her whole body trembling with the aftershocks of terror. "Can I hold you?" The question was so unexpected, so careful, that it broke something inside her. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and he gathered her into his arms. He held her like she was something precious. One hand cradled the back of her head, the other wrapped around her waist, keeping her anchored to reality. She buried her face in his chest and let herself shake apart. "I'm sorry," she gasped when she could finally speak. "I didn't mean to. You shouldn't have to." "Stop." His voice was gentle but firm. "You have nothing to apologize for. I woke the entire wing. You woke me. I was already awake. I don't sleep well either." He pulled back slightly, looking down at her face. "Do you want to talk about it?" She shook her head. Then, surprising herself, she started talking anyway. It was the cage, she whispered. 3 days in a space too small to stand. No food, barely any water. And the whole time I kept thinking that this was what I got for trying to do the right thing, that I should have just kept my mouth shut, that the truth wasn't worth this. Do you still believe that? I don't know. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Sometimes I think I should have been smarter, should have gathered more evidence, found more powerful allies, waited until I had an ironclad case. But I was so sure that if I just told someone, if I just spoke the truth, justice would follow. She laughed bitterly. I was naive. You were brave. Bravery without strategy is just stupidity. No. His hands cupped her face, tilting her head until she had to meet his eyes. Bravery without strategy is idealism, and idealism is the only thing that ever changes the world. Cynics accept corruption because fighting it is hard. Idealists expose it because they believe something better is possible. And look where that belief got me. It got you here. His thumbs brushed away her tears. In a castle, under royal protection, watching the man who wronged you be brought to justice. Your truth is going to save the kingdom millions in stolen resources. Your courage is going to send a message to every corrupt lord who thought they were untouchable. His voice dropped. Your idealism made me remember why I became king in the first place. Cora stared at him. What do you mean? Aldrich was quiet for a moment. Then he released her face and sat back on the bed, running a hand through his hair. I've been king for 15 years, he said. When I took the throne, I was full of plans. Reforms I wanted to implement, injustices I wanted to correct, a vision of what the kingdom could become. But over time, he sighed. Over time, I learned that every change I tried to make was blocked by someone with power and influence. Every reform was watered down. Every attempt at justice was mired in politics. So you gave up? I stopped fighting quite so hard. His jaw tightened. I told myself I was being strategic, picking my battles. But the truth is, I was exhausted. I'd been surrounded by liars for so long that I started to believe honesty was impossible, that everyone, everywhere, was just looking out for themselves. And then I showed up. And then you showed up. He met her eyes again. A woman in chains, with nothing to gain and everything to lose, who looked me in the face and told the truth anyway, who kept telling the truth even when no one believed her, who refused to lie even when lying would have been easier. I didn't know how to be anything else. That's exactly what I mean. He reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face. The touch was feather-light, almost reverent. You reminded me what integrity looks like, what it costs, what it's worth. His voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. You reminded me who I wanted to be. Cora's breath caught. He was so close now, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, close enough that if she leaned forward just slightly— You shouldn't say things like that to me, she whispered. Why not? Because I might believe them. Would that be so terrible? His hand came up to cup her cheek again, and she couldn't help but lean into the touch. Believing that you matter, that your truth has value, that someone might— He stopped, his jaw tightening. Might what? Might be falling in love with you. The words hung between them, heavy and impossible. You can't love me, Cora said, her voice cracking. You're a king, I'm a record keeper. I don't have anything, no wealth, no status, no family. I can't give you anything. You've already given me everything. His forehead pressed against hers. You gave me hope, Cora. In a world full of lies, you gave me truth. Do you have any idea how precious that is? How long I've been searching for someone like you? Aldrich, I'm not asking for anything. I know you don't trust easily, and I know you have every reason to doubt. But I need you to know. His voice shook slightly. I need you to know that when I look at you, I don't see a record keeper or a witness or a political asset. I see the bravest woman I've ever met. I see someone who refused to bend, even when bending would have saved her. I see. He pulled back enough to look into her eyes. I see my mate. The word hit her like a physical blow. Your wolf has known since the moment you walked into my hall. His smile was soft, almost vulnerable. I wasn't sure you were ready to hear it. I'm still not sure. But I won't lie to you, Cora. I can't. Not after everything you've taught me about the value of truth. She should pull away, should retreat, protect herself, maintain the walls that had kept her alive for so long. Instead, she leaned forward and kissed him. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, a question neither of them had dared to ask aloud. But when his arms came around her, when she felt the mate bond spark to life between them like lightning seeking ground, it deepened into something fierce and desperate and achingly real. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Aldrich pressed his forehead to hers. Stay with me, he murmured. Not as a guest, not as a witness, as my partner, as my equal. I don't know how to be that. Neither do I. His smile was crooked, almost boyish. We can figure it out together. She should say no, should be sensible, cautious, smart. Instead, she said, yes. And as he held her close, as the fire burned low and the nightmares retreated, Cora realized that the most terrifying truth she had ever told was the one she whispered against his chest. I think I'm falling in love with you. His arms tightened around her. I know I'm falling in love with you. For the first time in her life, Cora didn't doubt the truth of what she heard. 3 weeks of happiness, 3 weeks of stolen moments and whispered conversations, and a love that grew stronger with each passing day. Cora should have known it couldn't last. The trial was set to begin at the next full moon. Lord Ashford had been arrested, his assets seized, his allies scrambling to distance themselves from the scandal. The evidence Cora had helped compile was damning. Years of theft laid bare in meticulous detail, every stolen coin accounted for. Justice was finally within reach, and then the counterattack came. Cora was in the library when the doors burst open. A group of nobles swept in, Lord Ashford's allies, she realized with a sinking heart. At their head was Lady Vance, one of the most powerful women at court, her beautiful face twisted with cold fury. There she is! Lady Vance's voice dripped with contempt. The whore who has bewitched our king. Cora rose slowly, her heart pounding. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play innocent with me, girl. We know what you've done. Spreading your legs to gain the king's favour. Spinning lies about a noble lord to advance your own position. Lady Vance circled closer, her silk skirts rustling against the floor. Did you think we wouldn't fight back? Everything I've said is documented. The evidence can be fabricated. Witnesses can be bought. Lady Vance smiled, cold and sharp. And record keepers can be discredited. She snapped her fingers. and one of the nobles stepped forward with a sheaf of papers. "We have testimony from a dozen servants in Lord Ashford's household," Lady Vance announced. "They all swear that you were the one stealing, that you falsified records to cover your own crimes, then blamed Lord Ashford when you were caught." Her smile widened. "We also have statements suggesting that your relationship with the king is inappropriate, that you seduced him to gain protection from your own wrongdoing." Cora's blood ran cold. "That's not true. None of that is true. Truth is whatever the court believes, and right now, the court is very interested in our version of events. The king will never. The king is compromised." Lady Vance's voice hardened. "His judgment has been clouded by his infatuation with you. The council is already discussing whether he's fit to oversee this trial. Some are even questioning whether he's fit to rule." The words hit Cora like a physical blow. She had known there would be consequences to her relationship with Aldrich. She had known his enemies would use it against him. But she hadn't expected this. A coordinated attack designed not just to destroy her, but to undermine the king himself. "You can stop this," Lady Vance said, her voice dropping to something almost gentle. "Leave. Disappear. If you're gone, the scandal dies with you. The king can claim he was deceived, save face with the council, move on with his reign." She tilted her head. "It's the kindest thing you can do for him, really. Remove yourself before you drag him down with you." Cora's hands trembled. Part of her, the part that had learned to survive by making herself small, wanted to agree, wanted to run, to hide, to spare Aldrich the political nightmare she had brought to his doorstep. But another part of her, the part that had refused to stay silent even when silence would have saved her, rebelled against the very idea. "No." Lady Vance's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" "I said no." Cora straightened her spine, meeting the noblewoman's gaze. "I won't run. I won't hide. And I won't let you rewrite the truth to protect a thief and a traitor." "You foolish girl. You have no idea what you're—" "I know exactly what I'm doing." Her voice grew stronger. "I've spent my whole life being punished for honesty, dismissed, discredited, sold into slavery. And every single time I was told to be quiet, to accept injustice, to let powerful people do whatever they wanted because fighting back was too hard." She stepped forward, and Lady Vance actually retreated. "I'm done being quiet. Lord Ashford is guilty. The evidence proves it. And no amount of false testimony or political maneuvering will change that. You'll be destroyed. Maybe. But at least I'll be destroyed telling the truth. That's more than you can say." The library doors opened again, and Aldrich strode in, flanked by royal guards. His expression was thunderous. "Lady Vance!" His voice was ice. "I don't recall inviting you to terrorize my guests." "Your Majesty, I was simply—" "You were threatening the woman I love in an attempt to derail a legitimate investigation." He moved to stand beside Cora, his hand finding hers. "I heard everything. The guards outside were kind enough to inform me the moment you arrived." Lady Vance's face went pale. "Your Majesty, you must understand. The council has concerns. The council can bring their concerns to me directly. What they cannot do is send proxies to intimidate witnesses." His golden eyes blazed. "Lord Ashford is guilty. The evidence is irrefutable. And anyone who attempts to obstruct justice will be treated as his accomplice. You would destroy the stability of the realm for this commoner. I would burn the realm to the ground for her." The words were quiet, but they carried the weight of absolute certainty. "She is not a commoner. She is my mate, my future queen. and anyone who threatens her threatens me." The silence that followed was deafening. Lady Vance looked between them, calculation warring with fear in her eyes. Then, slowly, she inclined her head. "Forgive me, Your Majesty. I overstepped." "Yes, you did." Aldrich's voice was cold. "You have until sunset to leave the capital. If you're still here tomorrow, you'll be arrested alongside Lord Ashford." Lady Vance fled, her allies scrambling after her. When they were alone, Aldrich turned to Cora, his expression softening with concern. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine. I didn't—" She took a shaky breath. "You called me your future queen." "I did. In front of witnesses. In front of people who will spread it across the entire kingdom before nightfall." "I know." He cupped her face in his hands. "I should have asked you first. I should have done this properly. But when I heard what she was saying, when I thought about you facing that alone—" His jaw tightened. "I couldn't stay silent." "Neither could I." She managed a small smile. "I told her no. She gave me the chance to run, and I refused." "I know. I heard that too." Pride blazed in his eyes. "You were magnificent." "I was terrified." Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's speaking the truth despite it. He pressed his forehead to hers. "I love you, Cora. I want you beside me. Not just tonight, not just for the trial, but for the rest of our lives. Will you stay? Will you be my queen?" She should hesitate, should ask for time, weigh the consequences, think about what she was agreeing to. Instead, she said, "Yes, I'll stay. I'll be your queen. I'll stand beside you and tell the truth, no matter who tries to silence me." His smile was like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. "Then let's show them what truth can do." He kissed her, deep and fierce and full of promise, and Cora felt the last of her walls crumble. She had spent her whole life being punished for speaking the truth. Now she would spend the rest of it being loved for it. The trial of Lord Ashford lasted 3 days. Cora stood before the assembled court and testified for hours, her voice steady, her evidence irrefutable. She presented the ledgers, the correspondence, the shipping manifests, every piece of documentation she had gathered, now corroborated by the king's investigators. She named names, traced transactions, laid bare decades of corruption in meticulous detail. And when Lord Ashford's defenders tried to discredit her, tried to resurrect Lady Vance's lies about seduction and fabrication, she met their accusations with the calm certainty of someone who had nothing to hide. "You can question my character," she said, her voice carrying through the silent hall. "You can invent stories about my motives, but you cannot change the numbers. The evidence speaks for itself. Lord Ashford stole from this kingdom for 23 years. Every coin is accounted for. Every lie is documented. And no amount of slander will make that truth disappear." The verdict was unanimous. Guilty. Lord Ashford was stripped of his titles, his lands, his wealth. Everything he had stolen would be returned to the crown and redistributed to the villages and soldiers he had deprived. He would spend the rest of his life in prison, a warning to every noble who thought themselves above the law. When the sentence was announced, Cora felt something loosen in her chest, a weight she had carried since the day she first discovered the discrepancies, finally lifting. Justice. Real justice. Because she had refused to stay silent. Aldrich found her afterward, in the quiet of the castle gardens. She was sitting on a bench beneath a snow-covered tree, staring at nothing, still processing the magnitude of what had happened. "How do you feel?" he asked, settling beside her. "I don't know." She laughed softly. I thought this moment would feel different, triumphant, maybe, vindicated. But mostly I just feel tired. That's understandable. You've been carrying this burden for a long time. I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't believed me. She turned to look at him. If you had been like everyone else, if you had dismissed me, or sent me away, or… But I didn't. No, you didn't. She reached for his hand. You listened. That's all I ever wanted, really. For someone to listen. And now? He threaded his fingers through hers. What do you want now? She considered the question. A month ago, she wouldn't have had an answer. She had been so focused on survival, on justice, on simply making it through each day, that she had forgotten how to want things for herself. But now, looking at this man who had heard her truth and chosen to believe it, she knew exactly what she wanted. I want to build something, she said, with you. I want to spend my life surrounded by honesty instead of lies. I want to wake up every morning knowing that the person beside me sees me, really sees me, and loves me anyway. That can be arranged. He lifted her hand to his lips. In fact, I was hoping you'd say something like that. The wedding took place on the first day of spring. The great hall had been transformed into a cathedral of light. Candles flickered from every surface, their flames reflected in mirrors that lined the walls, creating the illusion of infinite brightness. White flowers cascaded from the pillars, lilies and roses, and delicate sprays of baby's breath. And at the end of the aisle, beneath an arch woven with silver and gold, stood the Lycan king. Cora walked toward him alone, her gown trailing behind her like a river of moonlight. She had no family to escort her, no father to give her away. But she didn't need anyone to deliver her to her future. She was choosing it herself. When she reached the altar, Aldrich took her hands. His eyes were bright with emotion. "You're beautiful," he murmured. "You're biased." Completely. His smile was radiant, and I intend to stay that way. The ceremony was ancient and sacred, words of binding spoken in the old tongue. They exchanged vows that promised partnership, honesty, trust, the foundations of everything they had built together. When it was Aldrich's turn to speak, he added words of his own. "I vow to always hear your truth," he said, his voice carrying through the silent hall. "To never dismiss your voice or doubt your word. To stand beside you against anyone who would silence you, and to spend every day proving that honesty is not just valued in this kingdom. It is treasured." Cora's eyes burned with tears she didn't try to hide. "And I vow to always speak it," she answered. "To never hide behind comfortable lies or convenient silences. To trust you with my truth, even when it's difficult. And to spend every day proving that the faith you placed in me was not misplaced." The marking came next. Aldrich tilted her head gently, his lips brushing her ear. "Ready?" "I've been ready since you took off my chains and asked me to tell you my story." His bite was sharp and sweet, and the mate bond blazed to life between them. She felt everything he felt, love so vast it stole her breath, pride that burned like a flame, a fierce, protective devotion that would last for eternity. She marked him in return, claiming him as hers, and felt his joy flood through the bond like sunlight. "My queen," he breathed. "My king," she answered. The crowd erupted into cheers, but Cora barely heard them. She was too busy kissing her husband, her mate, the man who had believed her when no one else would. The feast lasted until dawn. Nobles who had once looked at her with suspicion now bowed and offered congratulations. The same court that had nearly been turned against her by Lady Vance's lies now celebrated her as their queen. But the moment that mattered most came near midnight, when a messenger arrived with news from the Eastern Territories. Lady Vance had been arrested. Her role in Lord Ashford's conspiracy had been exposed. She had been laundering his stolen funds through her own estates for years. She would stand trial alongside the rest of his accomplices. "It seems your truth had more reach than you knew," Aldrich murmured, reading the report over her shoulder. "The truth always does," Cora replied. "Eventually." 2 years later, Cora stood on the balcony of the royal chambers, watching the sun rise over a kingdom transformed. So much had changed. The reforms Aldrich had dreamed of as a young king were finally becoming reality. New laws protecting commoners from noble abuse, systems of accountability that made corruption harder to hide, a court culture that valued honesty over flattery. And at the center of it all, working alongside her husband, was the record keeper who had once been sold into slavery for speaking the truth. Aldrich appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. His hands settled on the gentle swell of her belly, where their first child grew. "You should be resting," he said. "I wanted to watch the sunrise." She leaned back into his warmth. "I used to dread mornings. They meant another day of fighting to be heard. Now they mean another day of being listened to." "That's quite a change." "You're quite a change." She turned in his arms, looking up at the face she loved more than anything. "Thank you. For believing me when no one else did. For hearing my truth when everyone else wanted me to be silent. Thank you for speaking it." He kissed her forehead. "For being brave enough to tell the truth, even when it cost you everything. For teaching me what integrity really looks like." "I love you," she said. "I love you, and I will spend every day of my life being grateful that you leaned in to listen." "And I love you." He pulled her close. "My truth teller, my queen, my heart." They stood together as the sun climbed higher, wrapped in each other, their child growing between them. A record keeper who had been punished for her honesty, now ruling a kingdom that celebrated it. A king who had been starving for truth, now surrounded by it every day. She had been sent away for speaking the truth. And in the end, the truth had brought her home. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like and subscribe for more Lycan King romances. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload, and let us know in the comments. What tropes do you want to see next?